Welcome, and thank you for joining us today. In just the past few days, America has bid farewell to some truly extraordinary individuals, legends whose influence has shaped our culture, inspired countless lives, and will continue to echo through generations. Today, we pay tribute to their remarkable journeys, celebrate their timeless achievements, and reflect on the legacies they've left behind. If their stories have ever touched your heart, I invite you to honor them by liking this video, a small gesture to help keep their memory alive. Now, let's begin this heartfelt remembrance. Ricky Hatton, the charismatic British boxer affectionately nicknamed the Hitman, passed away on September 14, 2025 in Hyde, Greater Manchester, at the age of 46. His death marks the end of an era in British boxing, a chapter defined by grit, glory, and a fighter whose heart beat louder than any bell. Born on October 6, 1978 in Stockport, Hatton emerged from the tough, working-class streets of Greater Manchester with fists full of promise and a spirit forged in hardship. His rise was not just athletic, it was mythic. He became a symbol of resilience, a hometown hero who carried the hopes of a nation into every bout. With a professional record of 45 wins out of 48 fights, including 32 by knockout, Hatton was more than a competitor. He was a spectacle, a storm, a story that millions followed with breath held and hearts pounding. Fans remember him most vividly for his monumental victory over Kostya Tshayu in 2005, a night that transformed him from contender to legend. That fight, where he claimed the IBF light welterweight title, was not just a win, it was a coronation. The arena roared, the country celebrated, and Hatton stood tall as an overnight national icon. That moment defined his career, raw power, unshakable will, and a connection to the crowd that felt almost spiritual. Hatton's journey didn't stop there. He went on to capture additional world titles in both the light welterweight and welterweight divisions, facing the very best in the sport, Floyd Mayweather Jr. and Manny Pacquiao. Though those matches ended in defeat, they were battles of honor, fought with courage and conviction. Hatton's willingness to face giants, to stand toe-to-toe with greatness, only deepened the respect fans held for him. His knockout style, relentless energy, and blue-collar persona turned every fight into a communal experience, a shared heartbeat between fighter and fan. Even after stepping away from boxing in 2012, Hatton's impact never faded. He transitioned into training, mentoring young fighters, and giving back to the sport that had shaped his life. In 2024, he was inducted into the International Boxing Hall of Fame, a recognition not just of his record, but of his influence, his spirit, and the love he inspired in millions. Hatton was open about his personal battles, speaking candidly about his struggles with depression and substance abuse. That honesty, that vulnerability, made him even more beloved. He was not just a champion in the ring, he was a man who faced demons, who stumbled, who stood back up. His openness helped destigmatize mental health in sports, and endeared him to fans who saw in him not just a fighter, but a fellow human being. Ricky Hatton's legacy is not confined to titles or statistics. It lives in the energy he brought to boxing, in the ferocious heart that beat through every round, in the unwavering spirit that refused to quit. He was a warrior whose battles, both public and private, inspired generations. His story is one of triumph, vulnerability, and connection. For those whose love for boxing was ignited by a punch, a roar, a moment of pure Hatton magic, leave a comment with the number 46, his age, or simply write R.I.P. Ricky Hatton to honor the champ's life, his battles, and the electrifying legacy he leaves behind. Rick Davies, the singer, songwriter, and keyboardist who co-founded the progressive rock band Supertramp, passed away on September 5, 2025, at the age of 81. His death marks the quiet closing of a chapter in rock history, a chapter written in piano chords, lyrical grit, and melodies that still echo across generations. Born on July 22, 1944, in Swindon, England, Davies was a working-class musician with jazz in his fingers and blues in his bones. In 1969, he founded Supertramp, a band that would go on to redefine the boundaries of rock with its fusion of pop clarity and progressive ambition. From the band's early years in the 1970s through their global breakthrough, Davies remained its anchor, his voice and piano forming the bedrock of a sound that was both cerebral and soulful. Fans remember him most vividly for songs like Goodbye, Stranger and Bloody Well Right, where his smoky, grounded vocals provided a rich counterpoint to Roger Hodgson's soaring tenor. Together, they created one of rock's most distinctive vocal pairings, a yin and yang of tone and temperament that gave Supertramp its unmistakable identity. Their interplay wasn't just musical, it was emotional, philosophical, and unforgettable. In 1979, Supertramp released Breakfast in America, an album that sold over 20 million copies and became a global staple. Davies' compositions on that record, layered, lyrical, and laced with irony, cemented his place among rock's great storytellers. Audiences still recall his electric performances of Goodbye, Stranger, where his steady presence behind the keys gave the band its heartbeat, its pulse, its soul. Even after Hodgson's departure in 1983, Davies carried the band forward with quiet determination. He led tours that filled arenas worldwide, guiding Supertramp through decades of reinvention while staying true to its core. His resilience became part of the band's DNA, a testament to his belief in the music, the message, and the magic they had created. Diagnosed with multiple myeloma in 2015, Davies faced illness with the same quiet strength that defined his career. He continued to perform locally as Ricky and the Rockets, never letting go of the music that had shaped his life. His final years were marked by reflection, gratitude, and a deep connection to fans who had grown up with his songs as part of their emotional landscape. Rick Davies will always be remembered as the voice of resilience in Supertramp, a musician who blended bluesy grit with pop clarity, leaving behind melodies that continue to resonate in hearts and headphones around the world. His legacy is not just in the notes he played, but in the feeling they carried, introspection, irony, and a quiet kind of courage. If his music ever moved you, if his piano ever spoke to something unspoken inside you, leave a comment with the number 81, his age, or simply write R.I.P. Rick Davies to honor the voice, the vision, and the unforgettable sound he gave the world. Hermeto Pascoal, the prolific Brazilian composer and multi-instrumentalist whose imagination reshaped the very definition of music, passed away on September 13, 2025, at the age of 88. His death marks the loss of one of the most daring and original minds in modern music, a man who didn't just play instruments, but transformed everyday objects into symphonies of soul. Born on June 22, 1937, in Lagoa da Canoa, Alagoas, Brazil, Pascoal was born with albinism and poor eyesight, conditions that made his early life difficult in a rural setting. But from those challenges emerged a visionary. He saw sound where others saw silence. He heard rhythm in the rustle of leaves, harmony in the hiss of steam, and melody in the clink of glass. His nickname, O Bruxo, the Wizard, wasn't just affectionate, it was accurate. Pascoal conjured music from flutes, keyboards, accordions, teapots, water bottles, and even piglets, turning the mundane into the magical. From the 1960s onward, Pascoal's career was a kaleidoscope of experimentation. Albums like Hermeto, 1972, and Slave's Mass, 1977, showcased his fearless fusion of Brazilian folk, classical structure, jazz improvisation, and avant-garde soundscapes. He didn't just compose, he invented. His performances were spectacles of eccentricity and brilliance, where audiences never knew whether he'd play a traditional instrument or blow into a kettle to summon a new sonic universe. Pascoal's collaborations were legendary. Miles Davis once called him the most impressive musician in the world, a statement that echoed through jazz circles and beyond. He worked with Erto Moreira, Flora Purim, and countless others, always bringing a sense of play, daring, and depth to every project. His compositions, numbering in the thousands, were not just songs but sonic philosophies. He believed in musica universal, a music that transcended genre, language, and geography. Over the course of 7 decades, Pascoal mentored young musicians, composed for orchestras, and brought Brazilian music to global audiences. He was a teacher, a provocateur, a prophet of sound. His concerts were not just performances. They were journeys into the unknown, where laughter, awe, and revelation danced together. To fans around the world, Hermeto Pascoal will always be remembered as a fearless innovator who pushed musical boundaries and transformed sound into art. He was a man who made music breathe, laugh, and dream. His legacy is not just in the notes he played, but in the freedom he gave others to explore, to imagine, to create. If his music ever made you smile, gasp, or wonder, leave a comment with the number 88, his age, or simply write R.I.P. Hermeto Pascoal to honor a genius whose creativity changed generations of music and whose spirit will forever echo in the spaces between sound. Robby Turner, the legendary steel guitarist whose haunting tones shaped the emotional landscape of country music, passed away on September 4, 2025, at the age of 60. His death marks the loss of a quiet giant, an artist whose touch could make steel strings weep, whisper, or roar, and whose sound became the soul of countless country classics. Born in 1965 in Nashville, Tennessee, Turner grew up in a musical family where the steel guitar quickly became his voice. By the time he was barely out of high school, he was already playing on the road, a teenage prodigy whose talent defied age and expectation. Fans remember him not just for his technical mastery, but for the emotion he poured into every note. His solos weren't just performances. They were stories told in bends and slides, in echoes and silences. A fan-favorite moment came during Waylon Jennings' live shows in the 1980s, where Turner's steel guitar solos could transform the atmosphere of an entire arena. One slide of his bar could shift the mood from rowdy to reverent, from heartbreak to hope. It was as if the instrument itself had a soul, and Turner knew exactly how to speak through it. Over a career spanning more than 4 decades, Turner became one of Nashville's most in-demand session musicians. His steel guitar graced dozens of gold and platinum albums, adding texture, emotion, and depth to records that might otherwise have felt incomplete. He played alongside legends like Waylon Jennings, the Highwaymen, and later Chris Stapleton, always elevating the music with his signature sound. For fellow musicians, he was known as the secret weapon of country music, a player whose presence could transform a good song into a great one. But Turner was more than a performer. He was a producer, a mentor, and a guiding light for younger artists who looked up to his mastery. He understood the language of music not just as notes and chords, but as feeling, as connection, as truth. Even in later years, as health issues slowed him down, he continued to record, preserving his sound for future generations and ensuring that his voice, his steel, would never be silenced. Robby Turner's legacy is in the notes that linger long after the final chord. It's in the steel strings bending into emotion, in the quiet moments between verses, in the way his music made people feel seen, heard, and understood. He will be remembered not just as a musician, but as an artist who gave country music one of its most soulful voices, a voice that could cry for the brokenhearted, sing for the hopeful, and speak for those who had no words. If his music ever moved you, if his steel guitar ever made you pause, reflect, or feel something deeper, leave a comment with the number 60, his age, or simply write R.I.P. Robby Turner to honor the man whose sound became a sanctuary for so many. Greene, the pioneering Canadian Oneida actor who brought Indigenous stories to the center of film and television, passed away on September 1, 2025, at the age of 73. His death marks the loss of a cinematic elder, a man whose presence on screen was not just powerful, but transformative. Greene didn't just act. He embodied, he dignified, and he gave voice to characters who had long been silenced. Born on June 22, 1952, in Oswego, Ontario, Greene's journey to stardom was anything but conventional. Before stepping into the spotlight, he worked as a welder and audio technician, navigating the working-class world with quiet determination. It was in community theater that his talent began to shine, a spark that would grow into a flame seen across continents. Greene first captured global attention with his portrayal of Kicking Bird in Dances with Wolves, 1990, a role that earned him an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor. The film itself won 7 Oscars and grossed over $424 million worldwide, but it was Greene's performance that gave the story its soul. His dignified portrayal of a Lakota holy man was a fan-favorite moment, one that resonated deeply with audiences and critics alike. It wasn't just a role, it was a reclamation of narrative, a restoration of humanity to a people too often misrepresented. Over a career spanning more than 4 decades, Greene appeared in over 100 films and television episodes. He played a memorable guard in The Green Mile, 1999, added humor and charm to Maverick, 1994, and in later years reached younger audiences with his role in The Last of Us, 2023, where his grounded presence brought depth to a post-apocalyptic world. Whether in drama, comedy, or genre fiction, Greene's performances carried authenticity, weight, and a quiet power that lingered long after the credits rolled. At home in Canada, Greene was more than a celebrity. He was a cultural ambassador. He received Gemini Awards, Canadian Screen Awards, and in 2015 was appointed to the Order of Canada, one of the nation's highest honors. In 2025, just months before his passing, he was awarded the Governor-General's Performing Arts Award, a crowning recognition of a life spent elevating Indigenous voices and stories. Graham Greene's legacy is more than numbers or trophies. It is the memory of a voice and presence that gave Indigenous characters depth, dignity, and permanence on screen. He didn't just play roles, he opened doors. He made space. He reminded audiences that Indigenous stories are not relics of the past, but living, breathing truths that deserve center stage. His performances will live on as reminders of both his craft and his culture. They are echoes of resilience, reflections of identity, and celebrations of spirit. Greene's work helped redefine what it means to be seen, not just as an actor, but as a people. If his performances ever touched your heart, if his characters ever made you feel seen, heard, or understood, leave a comment with the number 73, his age, or simply write R.I.P. Graham Greene to honor his memory. And please share this tribute so that his legacy and spirit can continue to reach and inspire others. Polly Holliday, the American actress best remembered for her role as the feisty waitress Flo on the sitcom Alice, passed away on September 9, 2025. She was 87. Her death closes the curtain on one of television's most iconic voices, a woman whose sass, strength, and Southern charm helped redefine female characters on screen. Born on July 2, 1937 in Jasper, Alabama, Holliday's journey to stardom began not in Hollywood, but on the stage. She built her career in theater, honing her craft with precision and passion. It was this foundation that gave her performances such depth. Whether she was delivering a punchline or a poignant moment, Holliday always knew how to command a room. Her breakout role came in the 1970s when she portrayed Florence Jean, Flo Castleberry on Alice. With her signature catchphrase, "Kiss my grits," Holliday didn't just steal scenes, she stole hearts. Flo was bold, brassy, and unapologetically herself, a character who resonated with viewers across the country. In an era when women on television were often relegated to the background, Flo stood front and center, cracking jokes, speaking her mind, and refusing to be ignored. The role earned Holliday 2 Golden Globe Awards and 4 Emmy nominations, cementing her place in television history. She later starred in the spin-off series Flo, 1980-1981, bringing her beloved character to new audiences and proving that Flo's spirit couldn't be contained to a single diner. But Holliday's talent extended far beyond Flo. She took on varied roles in film and television, showcasing her versatility and range. She appeared in Gremlins, 1984, bringing a dose of humor to horror, in Mrs. Doubtfire, 1993, where her comedic timing added warmth to a family classic, and in the critically acclaimed series Home Improvement, where she played a recurring role with grace and grit. Whether in comedy or drama, Holliday brought authenticity to every character, strong women with wit, wisdom, and a touch of mischief. Outside her career, Holliday valued privacy. She devoted time to family and longtime friends, occasionally returning to stage work where her love for live performance never waned. She was known for her loyalty, her humility, and her unwavering dedication to her craft. Polly Holliday's legacy rests in the characters she brought to life, women who were bold, memorable, and unafraid to speak their minds. She remains a symbol of a groundbreaking era in American television, a time when voices like hers helped pave the way for future generations of actresses. If her performances ever made you laugh, cheer, or feel empowered, leave a comment with the number 87, her age, or simply write R.I.P. Polly Holliday to honor an actress whose voice and spirit left a lasting mark on generations of viewers. Tiana Mangakahia, the Australian basketball player whose courage, skill, and radiant spirit made her an inspiration far beyond the court, passed away on September 11, 2025. She was just 29 years old. Her death is not only a loss to the world of sports, but to every person who saw in her story a reflection of resilience, hope, and the power of perseverance. Born in Brisbane in 1995, Mangakahia grew up with a basketball in her hands and a fire in her heart. From local courts to national stages, she played with a passion that was unmistakable. Her rise to prominence came as a star guard at Syracuse University, where her dazzling playmaking, court vision, and leadership made her one of the most dynamic athletes in women's college basketball. In 2018, she led the nation in assists and shattered school records, quickly becoming a fan favorite for her fearless style and infectious energy. She wasn't just a player, she was a spark, igniting every game with brilliance and joy, but her journey was not without hardship. In 2019, at just 24 years old, Mangakahia was diagnosed with breast cancer, a moment that could have ended her career, but instead revealed the depth of her strength. After undergoing treatment, she made an emotional return to the court in 2020, a moment that resonated deeply with fans, teammates, and fellow athletes around the world. Her comeback wasn't just about basketball. It was about defiance, about reclaiming joy, about showing that even in the face of fear, the human spirit can rise. She later pursued professional opportunities in the Women's National Basketball League, WNBL, in Australia and overseas, continuing to showcase her resilience and passion for the game. Her performances remained electric, her presence on the court a testament to everything she had overcome. She also represented Australia on the international stage, earning caps with the national team and bringing her signature energy to global competition. Off the court, Mangakahia became a voice for young women facing cancer. She shared her journey with honesty and vulnerability, advocating for awareness and offering comfort to those walking similar paths. Her openness turned her into a beacon, not just for athletes, but for anyone battling illness, doubt, or fear. She showed that strength isn't just physical, it's emotional, spiritual, and deeply human. Tiana Mangakahia leaves behind not only the memory of her brilliant basketball career, but also her enduring example of courage, grace, and perseverance. Her legacy will inspire athletes and fans for generations. She was more than a player, she was a fighter, a leader, a light. If her story ever moved you, if her fight ever gave you strength, leave a comment with the number 29, her age, or simply write Mangakahia to honor her life, her battles, and the radiant legacy she leaves behind. Randy Boone, the actor and folk singer whose gentle charisma and musical spirit captured television audiences in the 1960s, passed away on August 28, 2025, at the age of 83. His passing marks the end of a golden thread in American entertainment, a time when storytelling was simple, heartfelt, and often accompanied by the strum of a guitar. Born on January 17, 1942, in Fayetteville, North Carolina, Boone grew up surrounded by music. Before he ever stepped in front of a camera, he was a troubadour, a young man with a guitar and a voice that carried the warmth of southern evenings. That musical foundation would become the heartbeat of his acting career, blending seamlessly into the roles he played and the characters he brought to life. Boone rose to fame with his breakout role as Randy Benton in NBC's long-running Western series The Virginian, which aired from 1962 to 1965. As Benton, Boone didn't just act, he sang. He strummed his guitar between scenes, weaving his real-life music into the fabric of the show and giving Benton a depth that resonated with viewers. His presence, added a layer of authenticity and tenderness to the rugged Western landscape, making him a fan favorite and a comforting figure in living rooms across America. Over the course of more than 70 episodes, Boone became a constant and beloved presence on one of television's most enduring Westerns. His portrayal of Benton was more than a performance. It was a reflection of a gentler masculinity, one that valued kindness, introspection, and the quiet power of song. He later joined Cimarron Strip from 1967 to 1968, adding depth to its ensemble cast, and continuing to bring his signature blend of music and emotion to the screen. Boone also appeared in popular series like Dr. Kildare and The Twilight Zone, showcasing his versatility and expanding his reach beyond the Western genre. Yet no matter the role, his performances always carried the same soulful energy, a clean-cut sincerity that defined the television heroes of the 1960s. Even as his acting career slowed, Boone never stopped making music. He performed folk songs on TV specials, toured with his guitar, and remained connected to the musical roots that had shaped his identity. His songs were simple, heartfelt, and timeless, echoes of a quieter era when melody and message mattered more than spectacle. Randy Boone's legacy is in the memories of evenings spent with the Virginian, in the gentle strum of his guitar, and in the steady presence he brought to screens and stages alike. He will be remembered not just as a Western star, but as a performer whose songs and roles carried the spirit of a bygone era, an era of storytelling, sincerity, and soul. If his music ever soothed you, if his characters ever made you feel at home, leave a comment with the number 83, his age, or simply write R.I.P. Randy Boone to honor the man whose voice and presence became part of America's cultural memory. Tom Shipley, best known as one half of the beloved folk rock duo Brewer and Shipley, passed away on August 25, 2025, at the age of 83. His death marks the fading of a voice that once carried the dreams, doubts, and defiance of a generation, a voice that sang softly but spoke volumes. Born on July 1, 1942 in Ohio, Shipley grew up steeped in music. From early days strumming in small-town cafes to commanding stages across America, he found his calling in the gentle power of song. His partnership with Mike Brewer began in the late 1960s, and together they became fixtures of the American folk rock movement, a genre rooted in storytelling, sincerity, and social consciousness. Fans remember their breakthrough single, One Toke Over the Line, 1970, a track that captured the spirit of its era with warmth, wit, and a touch of rebellion. Shipley's harmonies and guitar lines gave the song its earthy feel, grounding its psychedelic undertones in something deeply human. It became a fan-favorite anthem, played on radios, sung in concert halls, and etched into the cultural memory of the 1970s. But Shipley's impact went far beyond one hit. Over more than a dozen albums and countless performances, his presence shaped the duo's reputation for authenticity and connection. Their music wasn't just entertainment. It was a reflection of the times, a soundtrack for those searching for truth, harmony, and a sense of belonging. Shipley's voice carried the optimism and struggles of the era, weaving gentle humor and quiet wisdom into every lyric. Offstage, Shipley was admired for his humility and his ability to connect with audiences not just as a performer, but as a person. He understood that music could be a bridge, a way to reach across divides, to soothe, to inspire, to provoke thought. His songs were never loud, but they were always heard. Tom Shipley's legacy is in the soundtrack he helped create for a generation. It's in the harmonies that linger, the guitar chords that comfort, and the lyrics that still speak to the soul. His work with Brewer and Shipley carried the voice of a generation searching for meaning, and his music remains a reminder of how art can capture both joy and change. If his songs ever made you feel understood, if his melodies ever brought you peace, leave a comment with the number 83, his age, or simply write R.I.P. Tom Shipley to honor the man whose music still echoes in our hearts. Jerry Spence, the legendary litigator, author, and founder of the Trial Lawyers College, passed away on August 13, 2025, at the age of 96. His death marks the end of a towering legacy in American jurisprudence, a life defined by fierce advocacy, eloquent argument, and an unshakable belief in justice for the underdog. Born on January 8, 1929, in Laramie, Wyoming, Spence's roots were humble, grounded in the rugged terrain and working-class ethos of the American West. That upbringing shaped his worldview and his courtroom style, plain-spoken, passionate, and deeply human. He didn't just represent clients, he championed causes, stood up to power, and gave voice to those who had none. Over a career spanning more than 60 years, Spence became one of the most recognized and revered trial lawyers in the United States. He never lost a criminal case and won the vast majority of his civil cases, often against formidable opponents, corporations, media giants, and government agencies. His judgments totaled hundreds of millions of dollars, but his victories were measured not in money, but in meaning. Among his most famous cases was the 1987 defamation verdict against Penthouse magazine, where he secured $52 million on behalf of Miss Wyoming. He successfully defended Imelda Marcos in the 1990s and won the acquittal of Randy Weaver following the Ruby Ridge siege in 1992, a case that drew national attention and tested the boundaries of federal power. In each trial, Spence brought not just legal expertise, but moral clarity, emotional intelligence, and a theatrical flair that made him unforgettable. Spence was also a prolific author, writing 16 books that blended memoir, legal strategy, and social commentary. His 1995 bestseller How to Argue and Win Every Time sold more than 250,000 copies and became a must-read for lawyers and laypeople alike. Other works, such as The Making of a Country Lawyer, 1996, offered intimate reflections on how his Wyoming upbringing shaped his belief in standing up for ordinary people against powerful forces. His writing was not just instructive, it was inspirational, revealing the heart behind the courtroom fire. In 1994, Spence founded the Trial Lawyers College at Thunderhead Ranch in Wyoming, a school dedicated to training lawyers in the art of advocacy, empathy, and truth-telling. Since its inception, the college has trained more than 2,000 lawyers, many of whom have gone on to lead major criminal and civil rights cases across the country. The school became a living extension of Spence's philosophy, that justice belongs to everyone, and that the courtroom is a sacred space where stories must be told with courage and compassion. Spence also became a familiar face on television, offering commentary on high-profile trials and legal issues. Though sometimes controversial for his outspoken views and bombastic style, he was admired for his unwavering stance against corporate greed, government overreach, and legal injustice. He believed that the law should serve the people, not the powerful, and he lived that belief with every case, every book, and every student he mentored. Jerry Spence's passing closes the chapter on a remarkable life that shaped American trial law for generations. His courtroom victories, widely read books, and training of new lawyers ensured that his influence would continue long after his last case. He will be remembered not just as a litigator, but as a storyteller, a teacher, and a warrior for truth. If his work ever inspired you, if his words ever gave you courage, leave a comment with the number 96, his age, or simply write R.I.P. Jerry Spence to honor the man whose voice echoed through courtrooms and hearts alike. Jane Morgan, the elegant pop singer whose crystalline voice and cosmopolitan charm captivated American and European audiences throughout the 1950s and 1960s, passed away on August 4, 2025, at the remarkable age of 100. Her passing marks the end of a golden age in music, a time when clarity, grace, and emotional nuance defined the soundscape, and Jane Morgan stood at its center. Born on May 3, 1924, in Newton, Massachusetts, Morgan's musical journey began with rigorous training at the prestigious Juilliard School, where she honed her vocal technique and developed the poise that would become her hallmark. But it was in the nightclubs of post-war France that her career truly blossomed. Performing in Paris and other European cities, she built a devoted international fan base long before she became a household name in the United States. Her fluency in French and her ability to interpret songs with emotional precision made her a favorite among European audiences, who saw in her a rare blend of American glamour and continental sophistication. Morgan's breakthrough came in 1956 when she signed with Cap Records. The following year, she recorded Fascination, a song that would become her signature and sell over 1 million copies. With its sweeping melody and romantic allure, Fascination wasn't just a hit, it was a cultural moment, a soundtrack for weddings, dances, and quiet evenings across the globe. Her voice, clear, warm, and effortlessly expressive, became synonymous with elegance. During the late 1950s and 1960s, Morgan released more than a dozen albums and charted numerous singles both in the United States and internationally. The Day the Rains Came, 1958, peaked at number 21 on the Billboard Hot 100 and reached number 1 in the UK, while With Open Arms, 1959, further cemented her reputation as a transatlantic star. Albums such as Jane Morgan Sings, 1957, Time, 1960, and What Now, My Love, 1966, showcased her vocal virtuosity and her ability to adapt to changing musical landscapes without ever compromising her artistic integrity. Morgan was a frequent guest on major television programs, including The Ed Sullivan Show, and performed regularly at top venues on both sides of the Atlantic. Her stage presence was refined yet emotionally resonant, her performances marked by a quiet intensity that drew listeners in and held them close. Even as rock and roll began to dominate the charts, Morgan remained a steadfast figure in traditional pop, continuing to perform in vaudeville, on Broadway, and in European concert halls well into the 1970s. Admired for her professionalism, versatility, and unwavering commitment to her craft, Jane Morgan was more than a singer. She was an ambassador of musical elegance. She bridged generations and genres, offering audiences a sound that was timeless, tender, and true. Her recordings remain standards for those who prize clarity, warmth, and emotional depth in music. Jane Morgan's death marks the loss of one of the last enduring voices of the pre-rock era, a voice that carried the sophistication of mid-century pop and the emotional resonance of a bygone time. Her legacy lives on in the songs that continue to grace weddings, radio stations, and memory itself. If her music ever touched your heart, if her voice ever made you feel transported, leave a comment with the number 100, her age, or simply write R.I.P. Jane Morgan to honor a singer who brought timeless beauty to traditional pop and whose elegance will never fade. Marie Osmond, a name that once shimmered like a promise of innocence, of joy, of a simpler time in American entertainment. In the 1970s, she was more than a performer. She was a symbol, a national treasure. With her angelic voice and ever-present smile, she became the radiant centerpiece of the Osmond dynasty, the daughter who carried not only her own dreams, but the weight of an entire family's legacy. To millions, she was flawless, a vision of youthful charm, a beacon of wholesomeness. But behind that image lay a life far removed from the simplicity it portrayed. Fame, as it often does, cast a cruel shadow. And for Marie, that shadow arrived early, stealing her childhood, burdening her adulthood, and leaving scars that even the warmest applause could not erase. At just 3 years old, when most little girls clutched dolls or twirled barefoot in the sun, Marie stood under blinding studio lights, gripping a microphone too big for her tiny hands. Her innocence wasn't lost, it was traded. Exchanged for fame before she even understood what it meant. Born in 1959, the only daughter among 9 Osmond siblings, Marie was never just a child. She was a brand, a product. Every smile, every note, every carefully staged performance was part of an identity constructed for public consumption. Her first major television appearance came in 1962 on The Andy Williams Show. While most children would barely remember such a moment, for Marie it was the beginning of a lifelong contract with the spotlight. Her parents, devout Mormons with unyielding ambition, demanded excellence at any cost. Every Osmond child had to master instruments, learn harmonies, endure rehearsals, and teach one another. Fun was not part of the equation. Discipline was. When Marie once asked her mother if she could play outside, the chilling response was, "No, you can't go. You have work to do." Years later, Marie confessed, "I felt more like a product than a child." At age 11, she was sent to Japan for a commercial shoot, a trip that should have been an adventure. Instead, it nearly cost her life. The boat carrying her capsized, leaving her stranded in shark-infested waters. By the time she was rescued, her skin was burned by the sun, her body dangerously dehydrated. Yet there was no pause for healing, no space for rest. She was forced straight back into the recording studio. "I was covered in burns," she later recalled, "and still I was told to smile and sing." In her candid memoir Behind the Smile, Marie opened a window into that hidden world. She spoke of confusion, loneliness, and the heavy emptiness behind the perfection. Even as the nation adored her as the radiant darling of America's favorite musical family, her true voice was muted, her identity stifled by expectation. She learned early to disconnect, from joy, from freedom, even from herself. Yet the remarkable truth is that she didn't break. The pressure hardened her into someone who could endure unimaginable trials later in life. What began as survival on stage became the armor that protected her through heartbreaks, public humiliation, and the devastating loss of her own child. As the 1970s unfolded, Marie's star rose higher. With her brother Donnie, she became half of the iconic duo Donnie and Marie. Their variety show filled American living rooms with light, laughter, and music. Audiences saw a smiling sister, a wholesome family figure, a performer whose sweetness seemed unshakable. But off-camera, the cracks were widening. Behind the rehearsed smiles and sparkling costumes was a young woman struggling to reconcile the image the world demanded with the person she was becoming. Fame had never asked her permission, and it demanded sacrifices few could endure. In interviews years later, Marie admitted that while the world saw her as a beacon of positivity, she often felt consumed by self-doubt and loneliness. The perfection she was forced to embody came with a brutal cost, the loss of her sense of self. As she navigated adolescence and adulthood, her personal battles deepened. From eating disorders to depression, Marie faced struggles she felt she couldn't reveal in a world that only wanted her smile. "I was trained to hide everything," she once said, "so I hid the pain, too." But life was not finished testing her. The deepest cut of all came in 2010 when her son Michael, battling severe depression, took his own life at the age of 18. For a mother who had once survived her own storms of despair, the tragedy was unbearable. She admitted later that she had known his pain, recognized its shadows, because she had walked in them herself. Yet nothing could prepare her for that loss. It was a wound that would never truly heal. A reminder that even survival has limits. And yet, even through grief, Marie's resilience endured. She continued to perform, to sing, to appear on stage and television, carrying with her both the strength and the scars of her journey. But she also made decisions that shocked the world. In 2020, she publicly declared that she would leave none of her fortune to her children. After decades of carrying the burdens of expectation, she explained her choice with calm conviction. "My children need to earn their way. Giving them money doesn't help them." Critics called it harsh. Admirers called it honest. For Marie, it was a final act of teaching, one rooted not in rejection, but in resilience. Her decision spoke volumes about the woman she had become. She knew the danger of being trapped by other people's expectations, the way dependence could steal independence. She wanted her children to stand on their own, to find strength the way she had been forced to. It was not cruelty. It was clarity, born of a lifetime spent fighting to define herself outside of other people's control. Marie Osmond's story is one of contrasts, a public smile hiding private sorrow, a life celebrated for its brightness but shadowed by pain. She was never just America's sweetheart. She was a survivor, a mother, a woman who learned to endure and to teach endurance. Her voice carried more than songs. It carried the story of survival in a world that often demanded too much and gave too little in return. At just 15 years old, she became the shining face of the Donnie and Marie show, a primetime variety program that catapulted her into the national spotlight. To millions, she was a radiant teen idol glowing with innocence and charm. But what the audience never saw was the silent battle Marie fought behind the scenes, a battle with her own reflection. The show placed her beside the most glamorous women of the time, Jaclyn Smith, Farrah Fawcett, Raquel Welch. Marie later confessed that standing next to them, she felt like she was playing dress-up, a child pretending to be a star. That self-doubt grew dangerous when studio executives issued a chilling ultimatum: lose 10 pounds or risk cancellation. At the time, Marie weighed only 103 pounds. The demand was cruel, but Marie complied. Driven by shame and fear, she starved herself down to 93 pounds, surviving on a mixture of lemon juice, cayenne pepper, and maple syrup, a punishing diet popularized in Hollywood but never meant for a teenager. Her routine was agonizing. She would fast for days before tapings just to squeeze into costumes that symbolized acceptance. This act of control, or what she thought was control, spiraled into something far darker. By her early 20s, Marie had developed both anorexia and bulimia. In her 2018 interview, she finally revealed the extent of her suffering. "They called me an embarrassment. At 103 pounds, I didn't want to eat. I didn't want to feel. It was the only way I could take back control." Her smile, so constant on screen, was masking a storm within. This period also forced her to confront deeper wounds. In a 2019 appearance on The Talk, Marie opened up about being physically abused as a child, a haunting experience that had long gone unspoken. "When I was 8 or 9, I actually thought I was different," she shared, hinting at a time when she questioned her worth and identity. The weight obsession wasn't just about beauty. It was rooted in a lifelong message she had absorbed, that her value came from performance, from perfection, from being palatable. This toxic equation broke her spirit piece by piece, and yet she endured. Through silent suffering and societal expectations, Marie kept performing, but every round of applause came at the cost of a deeper emotional wound. Her story during these years wasn't one of youthful stardom. It was one of surviving emotional and physical punishment in a world that asked for more and more until nothing was left to give. Still, somehow, she gave. And in giving, she stayed. She stayed for her fans, for her family, and perhaps in some way for the little girl who never got to be a child. The glitter of the spotlight hit a young woman crying out for self-worth. Marie Osmond didn't just grow up in front of America. She bled behind its curtains, but through it all, she never let go of hope. Not entirely. Even as the world judged her, Marie chose to survive, a decision that would come to define the next chapter of her life. She sang of love, but her own heart knew heartbreak far too well. For all the glittering gowns and stage lights that framed Marie Osmond's life, behind the scenes was a woman quietly chasing a dream of lasting love, only to find it slipping through her fingers time and again. In the late 1970s, as America's sweetheart lit up television screens across the nation, she was also navigating the delicate emotions of her first romantic encounters. One of her earliest crushes was Michael McDonald of the Doobie Brothers, a tender affection that never fully blossomed, but remained close to her heart. Marie admired his soulful voice and introspective nature, finding comfort in the serenity he exuded. Yet their connection never evolved beyond gentle admiration. Two artists on parallel paths that briefly intersected. Soon after, she dated Andy Gibb, the golden boy of pop, a man she once called adorable and so kind. Their romance was sweet but fleeting, ending like a melody unresolved. Andy's struggle with addiction and the demands of fame proved too heavy for their young love to bear. Marie remembered their time together with fondness, once saying, "He had the kindest heart. I only wish the world had been kinder to him." Then came David Cassidy, another icon of television and teen fame. From the outside, they looked like a perfect match, both beautiful, beloved, and wildly successful. But under the surface, their worlds were spinning too fast, too separately. The relationship, while filled with excitement, lacked the grounding Marie needed. It was like trying to hold on to a dream while everything else was spinning out of control, she once recalled. In 1982, Marie married Steve Craig, a former basketball player she believed would bring her a sense of normalcy. She was just 22, a young woman hoping to write a quieter chapter away from the glare of stardom. They welcomed a son, and for a time, Marie believed she had found her anchor. But only 3 years later, the fairy tale unraveled. The couple divorced in 1985, and Marie was left to pick up the emotional pieces. The public nature of the split added to the burden. "I felt like I had failed not just as a wife, but as a mother," she later admitted. Just a year later, in 1986, she married Brian Blossel, a man she would spend over 2 decades with, and with whom she raised a large, blended family of 8 children. From the outside, it seemed she had finally found the stability she yearned for. But behind closed doors, the cracks were forming. The marriage, while filled with moments of love and togetherness, was also marked by emotional distance and unresolved pain. Marie rarely spoke publicly about the struggles, but when she did, her words revealed deep weariness. "I was tired of pretending everything was okay. It wasn't." The demands of raising a large family, maintaining a career, and navigating emotional disconnect quietly took a toll. By 2007, after 21 years of marriage, Marie and Brian divorced, a decision that shook the foundation of the life she had built. It wasn't just the end of a relationship. It was the end of a belief that love, after all the tries, might finally hold. Her heart, once so full of hope, now carried the quiet ache of disappointment. As she entered this new chapter, single once more, with a fractured heart and the weight of motherhood, Marie was about to face the greatest heartbreak of her life. But even in these years of failed relationships and quiet despair, she remained unwavering in her love for her children. That love would be tested in ways no mother should ever endure. And what came next would change Marie Osmond forever. In the eyes of the public, Marie Osmond had it all: fame, beauty, and a successful career. But behind the dazzling lights and applause was a woman silently battling one of the most devastating personal struggles any mother could endure. Marie, a mother of 8, faced an emotional storm that nearly broke her spirit, one that began quietly but would shape much of her personal life. By 1999, after giving birth to her 7th child, Matthew, Marie was no longer the effervescent icon the public knew. She was emotionally drained, overwhelmed, and most heartbreakingly, deep in the throes of postpartum depression. In a raw and revealing interview with TV Guide that same year, she opened up. "I couldn't function. My body ached, my arms wouldn't move, and my thoughts terrified me." What many dismissed as typical baby blues had spiraled into something much darker. Her depression became so severe that one day she walked out of her home, leaving her children behind with a babysitter. She drove aimlessly for days, unsure if she'd ever return. It was only when she came back that a doctor confirmed what she already feared. She was suffering from clinical depression. This wasn't Marie's first brush with emotional turmoil, but it was one of the deepest. And while she had endured public scrutiny and industry pressures for years, nothing prepared her for the internal battle that followed childbirth. She later admitted in a 2010 interview with Oprah Winfrey that she had even contemplated vanishing from the world. "There were moments when I was driving and thought, would anyone really miss me? That's how depression speaks to you. It lies." As if this pain weren't enough, the public's speculation made it worse. In August 2006, rumors erupted that Marie had attempted to harm herself and was hospitalized. The tabloids fed off the narrative, but her publicist quickly clarified the truth. It was a reaction to medication that caused her to black out, not an intentional act. Yet the damage was done. The public's misunderstanding of mental illness only magnified her suffering. Marie, however, handled the situation with grace. She didn't lash out at the media. Instead, she used her platform to talk candidly about her mental health, hoping to remove the stigma for other mothers suffering in silence. Still, the weight on her shoulders didn't let up. In 2007, while competing on Dancing with the Stars, Marie collapsed live on national television just moments after finishing a samba performance. Viewers watched in horror as she fainted during the judges' critiques. Paramedics rushed to the stage, but Marie recovered quickly, even managing to crack a joke shortly afterward. "I guess I just samba'd myself into the floor," she quipped. But the incident was a glaring reminder of how deeply Marie was pushing herself, emotionally, mentally, and physically. Through it all, Marie never lost sight of her love for her children. Her role as a mother, though fraught with pain and uncertainty, remained her most cherished. "Motherhood is not for the faint of heart," she once said. "It breaks you down, but it also rebuilds you in ways you never imagined." That sentiment rang especially true as she navigated raising 8 children while battling the shadows of mental illness. Her journey through postpartum depression was not just about survival. It was about transformation. It taught her to prioritize her mental health, to ask for help, and to lean into faith when the weight felt unbearable. For a woman who once represented the squeaky clean image of Hollywood's ideal daughter and sister, Marie's vulnerability became her strength. In sharing her story, she didn't just advocate for awareness, she gave a voice to the voiceless. To the mothers sitting in silence, to the women too ashamed to ask for help, to the daughters who believed they had to be perfect, she showed them that healing begins with honesty. Her words, her pain, and her courage became a lifeline. This chapter of Marie's life is not about celebrity or glamour. It's about a woman brought to her knees by the quiet agony of depression and her decision to rise anyway. In her resilience, we find not only sorrow, but hope. Because through every breakdown, Marie Osmond found a way to rise again, not just for herself, but for the family she loved more than anything. No mother should ever have to bury her child. For Marie Osmond, that unimaginable nightmare became a devastating reality in 2010, when she lost her beloved son, Michael. In this most heartbreaking chapter of her life, the eternal smile that had brightened American television for decades faded behind a grief so deep, so raw, it nearly shattered her. It was a chilly February evening in 2010, when Marie, preparing for a live performance with her brother Donnie, noticed a missed call from her 18-year-old son. She would never get to hear his voice again. Moments later, the call that followed was from the coroner's office. Michael had fallen from the 8th floor of his Los Angeles apartment building. The official cause, multiple blunt trauma from the fall, no drugs, no alcohol, just a silent, unbearable pain that had consumed him. The loss of Michael was more than a tragedy. It was a scream into the void, a violent rupture in Marie's world. He had battled depression for years. He had promised her he wouldn't do anything drastic, but depression is a silent predator, hiding behind smiles and soft reassurances. Later, she would discover a note, words scrawled from a place of torment, confirming that he had been bullied and felt hopeless. That note, she said in a trembling voice, was the last echo of his soul. Marie later revealed on. That same year, she told Oprah, "There were times I'd drive my car and think about it, and then I'd say, 'Marie, that's ridiculous.'" But she admitted, "I had those thoughts." In 2018, she opened up further. "The truth is, when you're that low, you just want the pain to stop. It wasn't about dying. It was about ending the pain." That distinction, between despair and the longing for peace, echoes with countless others who have stood at the edge of emotional abyss. The aftermath of Michael's death was brutal. His siblings were devastated. The home became a shrine of silence. Marie, a woman who had already battled postpartum depression in the late 90s, now faced a grief that words couldn't contain. But through the agony, something extraordinary happened. Marie chose to speak out. She turned her pain into purpose. On national platforms, she began to share Michael's story, not for pity, but to shine a light on mental health, bullying, and the importance of communication. Her voice, once known for sweet melodies, now carried the weight of advocacy. She partnered with organizations, raised awareness, and urged parents to check in, to listen closely, to notice the signs. In doing so, she gave Michael's death meaning beyond loss, yet the scars remained. In 2022, she dedicated a song in her Vegas show to Michael. Her voice broke midway. The audience, moved to tears, rose to their feet in silence. It wasn't just a performance, it was a sacred moment of remembrance. In 2023, on the anniversary of his death, she posted, 13 years and not a day goes by that I don't think of him. Grief doesn't disappear, you just learn to carry it differently. The pain never left. It became part of her, but it also deepened her compassion. Friends and fans noticed a new gravity in Marie's presence. A woman who had suffered, survived, and now held space for others in pain. Through her loss, Marie became a beacon not just of endurance, but of grace. She remains one of Hollywood's rare souls who dares to speak the hard truths that even stars break, that even mothers crumble. And yet, like a phoenix, she rose, scarred but shining. Her story is not just about heartbreak. It's about the enduring power of love, the strength of a grieving mother, and the legacy of a boy whose memory now saves lives. Michael's life was short, but through Marie, his voice echoes still. Just when Marie Osmond thought her soul had endured the deepest pain a mother could ever face, Life delivered wave after wave of new heartbreak. The years following Michael's death were not a time of healing. They were a slow unraveling of more loss, more grief, and the cruel reality that even those who smile the brightest are not spared from sorrow. In 2004, Marie said goodbye to her beloved mother, Olive Osmond, the woman who had been her spiritual anchor. Olive wasn't just a mother. She was Marie's best friend, a calming presence amid the chaos of fame. "She was my compass," Marie later shared, her voice filled with gratitude and aching nostalgia. Only 3 years later, in 2007, Marie lost her father, George. Though he had lived to witness the heights of the Osmond family's success, his absence left another hole in her heart. Both her parents were gone, two of her greatest sources of strength. Marie, now a mother herself and a national icon, suddenly felt like a child again, abandoned in a vast emotional wilderness. The heartbreak didn't stop there. In 2018, her family was hit once more, this time with the sudden death of one of her grandchildren. Though details remain private out of respect, Marie hinted at the tragedy during a somber moment in an interview. Her voice trembling, she said, "Loss doesn't get easier, it just becomes more familiar." The look in her eyes said what words could not. Then came 2022, a year that shattered her daughter Jessica's world. Jessica's husband, Chris Mortensen, died as a result of street violence. The senselessness of the incident left Marie reeling. As a mother watching her own child grieve the loss of a life partner, she felt a helpless kind of agony. It was grief within grief, an echo of the pain she knew all too well. As if the burden wasn't already too much, Marie's older brother Verl suffered a severe stroke around this time. Verl, one of the original Osmond brothers, had been a pillar of the family's musical dynasty. His sudden decline served as yet another reminder of how fragile life can be. Marie stood by her family, quietly holding everyone together, even as her own heart continued to fracture in silence. But perhaps the most devastating blow came in early 2025. Marie's brother Wayne Osmond passed away at the age of 73 after suffering a stroke. Wayne was not just a sibling. He had been a constant in her life, a confidant, a co-performer, a gentle soul whose laugh had brought her comfort during the darkest nights. His death tore yet another jagged wound into a heart already worn thin. On social media, Marie described it as another giant hole in my heart. The pain in her words resonated with fans who had followed the Osmonds for decades. They too had come to love Wayne, and they grieved with her. These compounded losses were not just personal. They were symbolic. Each death marked the slow fading of an era, a family dynasty, a life once bursting with music, laughter, and boundless energy. And Marie, ever the public figure, was forced to balance public appearances with private mourning. Still, through every loss, she never wavered from her message of strength. "We all carry something," she said during a 2023 interview. "But I've learned that the heart can stretch farther than you think. It breaks. It bleeds, but it also holds space for healing." These aren't just words. They are truths carved into her soul. As the years passed, Marie didn't retreat from life. Instead, she chose to keep showing up for her fans, her children, and the memory of those she had lost. Her continued presence in the spotlight wasn't vanity. It was survival. It was defiance against a world that had taken so much from her. Through the years, her fans saw the shift. The once bubbly teen idol had become a woman of quiet resilience. Her performances now carried a deeper resonance, a sense of history and heartbreak that could not be taught, only lived. She no longer sang just to entertain. She sang to honor, to remember, and to endure. By 2025, Marie Osmond had become more than just a celebrity. She was a symbol, a mother who had buried a child, a daughter who had lost both parents, a sister, aunt, and grandmother who carried the weight of loss with grace and dignity. And through it all, she never stopped believing in love, family, and the power of faith. Because in Marie's world, pain may be inevitable, but surrender never is. At 65, while many celebrities fade into quiet retirement, Marie Osmond continues to shine in her own unique way. Not from the spotlight, but from the quiet strength of a woman who has endured, healed, and chosen joy. Nestled in the peaceful desert landscape of St. George, Utah, Marie's 10,000-square-foot mansion is more than a luxurious retreat. It's a reflection of a life rebuilt with intention and love. She has lived there since 1999, long before some of her greatest losses, and the home has grown with her, transforming from a house into a sanctuary. It boasts a private pool, tennis court, and a professional-grade recording studio, a tribute to her enduring connection to music. Yet what makes it truly special isn't the size or the amenities, but the soul poured into every corner. Marie personally designed the interior not to flaunt wealth, but to preserve memories. Each room holds fragments of her family, her past, and her passion. This space is also where she finds peace. Surrounded by desert mountains and golden sunsets, Marie lives at a slower pace now. She takes long, brisk walks, rides bikes with her grandchildren, and often laughs about how she tries to outpace them. "Being a grandma is the best role I've ever had," she once said. Her commitment to health is not about vanity. It's about energy, about being present, about still dancing when life plays its tune. And yes, rumors have swirled for years about cosmetic surgery. Marie, ever candid, has brushed them off with grace. "I just want to feel my best, but the lines on my face, they're the roads I've traveled," she once said in an interview. Her face may have changed, but her spirit remains unmistakably Marie, resilient, warm, and radiant. But perhaps the most surprising chapter of Marie's later life is her love story, one that seemed lost to time, only to be rewritten with more depth than before. In 2011, she remarried Steve Craig, her first husband from 1982. They had divorced in 1985 after only 3 years of marriage. Life had taken them down different roads, Marie with her career, Steve with his own journey. But somehow, after decades and 2 very different lives, they found their way back to each. And just when the public thought they'd heard it all, Marie Osmond made headlines again, not for a new album, not for a comeback tour, but for a personal financial decision that stunned many. She announced that she would not be leaving her estimated $20 million fortune to her children. "I'm not passing on my wealth," she said firmly. "My kids need to learn to work. If you hand them everything, they get lazy." It was a stance that sparked controversy. Critics called her cold. Commentators questioned her maternal instincts, but Marie stood her ground, not with defensiveness but with conviction. "I love my children enough to not make them weak," she explained. "I've seen too many rich kids lose their way because they never had to struggle. I want mine to know the joy of earning something." This wasn't detachment. It was discipline. It was faith. It was the very essence of Marie Osmond's beliefs, rooted in the values she was raised with, in a family where every child worked hard from the moment they could hold a microphone or memorize a harmony. She knows the value of purpose, of drive, of building something with your own hands. Her children are not left unsupported. She remains an active, loving presence in their lives, but she has chosen to give them something more enduring than money, the ability to stand on their own, to fall and rise, to discover their own strength. And so, what remains of Marie Osmond today? What has this woman become after decades of fame, family, heartbreak, and healing? She is a symbol, not of perfection, but of perseverance. She still walks onto stages, not for fame, but because music is the language of her soul. She still gives interviews, not for attention, but because her story might help someone else feel less alone. She still folds laundry, still cooks for her grandchildren, still laughs at herself when she forgets lyrics mid-song. And in the silence of her Utah home, she still lights a candle for Michael, still sings his favorite songs, still folds his memory into every note she performs. "I pray when I can't stand," she once told a friend, and in that prayer she finds the strength to rise again. Marie Osmond is no longer just the girl with the perfect smile. She is the woman who survived the storm, the mother who buried a child and still chose love, the sister who lost her brothers and still chose music, the daughter who lost her parents and still chose grace. She is the voice that trembles but never fades, the heart that breaks but never closes, the soul that sings, not because it is whole but because it remembers. And in that remembering, she becomes more than a celebrity. She becomes a legacy.